What if I told you the real fix for your gut isn't sitting in a $200 supplement bottle or a probiotic aisle at the pharmacy? It's sitting forgotten in a root cellar, a farmer's market bin, or a corner of your backyard you've walked past 1,000 times. Most people have no idea that within 24 to 48 hours of eating the right root vegetable, your gut bacteria start producing compounds that feed your colon cells directly, and some of that chemical signaling starts almost the moment it hits your gut. Full repair takes months, but the process, that begins today. Today, I'm going to walk you through 20 forgotten root vegetables, traditional, ancient, and almost extinct from the modern plate, that feed the exact bacteria responsible for healing your gut lining. Stick around, because number 9 was fed to a starving expedition and nearly destroyed them before it saved them. And number 1 might be the single most concentrated gut repair root on the planet, and almost nobody's heard of it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're building a channel for people who want real, evidence-based nutrition. Not fads, not fear, just what the research actually says. Let's get into it. Here are 20 forgotten root vegetables that feed and heal your gut, ranked from remarkable to absolutely extraordinary. Number 20, American groundnut, the protein bean hiding underground. Long before European settlers arrived, the American groundnut was a staple for indigenous peoples across eastern North America, prized enough that early colonists leaned on it during failed harvests. This wasn't a backup food. It was a deliberate protein source. Its tubers pack roughly 3 times the protein of a regular potato. This wasn't just filler food. It was strategic nutrition. Modern science confirms it's rich in dietary fiber and anti-inflammatory isoflavones, plant compounds shown to calm inflammation in lab studies. But raw groundnut also carries mild natural toxins, which is exactly why it was always boiled or baked first, never eaten raw. Here's the traditional use. Boil or bake the tubers like a potato, never eat them raw. Number 19. Jicama, the crisp root nobody thinks of as medicine. Native to Mexico, jicama has been eaten for centuries as a refreshing, water-rich root, usually raw, with lime and chili, sold on street corners long before it hit U.S. grocery stores as a diet food. This wasn't just a snack. It was a deliberate gut and blood sugar tool. Modern science confirms jicama is loaded with prebiotic inulin, fiber your own enzymes can't break down, but your gut bacteria can. Studies show it helps normalize blood glucose and even boosts immune activity in gut-associated tissue. Here's the traditional use. Eat it raw, thin sliced, with a squeeze of lime, no cooking needed. Number 18. Burdock root, the weed Japan turned into medicine. Known as gobo in Japanese cooking and herbal tradition, burdock has deep taproots that were dug up and eaten for generations across Europe and Asia, long before prebiotic was a marketing word. This wasn't folk superstition. It was targeted gut defense. Modern science confirms burdock's inulin and fructooligosaccharides directly suppress harmful gut bacteria like Clostridium, while its phenolic compounds protect the gut lining from oxidative damage. Here's the traditional use. Slice it thin and sauté or simmer it into a broth. It's tough raw, so cook it down. Number 17. Skirret, the medieval sugar root nobody remembers. In medieval Europe, skirret was so prized for sweetness the Germans called it Zuckerwurzel, sugar root. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder even wrote that Emperor Tiberius demanded it be shipped to him every year. This wasn't just a treat. It was considered a digestive remedy. Modern science confirms skirret is dense in soluble fiber, potassium, and vitamin C, the same class of fiber shown to feed beneficial gut bacteria and support regularity. Skirret got forgotten because it's slow to grow and fussy to harvest, not because it stopped working. Here's the traditional use. Roast the roots whole until the natural sugars caramelize. Number 16. Kama's root, the bulb that nearly wrecked Lewis and Clark. For indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, kamas was a carbohydrate staple, so central to survival that entire meadows were tended and harvested generation after generation. When the starving Lewis and Clark expedition was finally fed kamas by the Nez Perce, some of the men got violently sick, not because the root was bad, but because they ate it raw and underprepared. This wasn't a mistake in the tradition. It was proof the tradition mattered. Modern science confirms kama's bulbs are packed with long-chain inulin fiber that resists human digestion entirely. which is exactly why indigenous women pit roasted it in earth ovens for 24 to 72 hours, breaking that fiber down into something the gut could actually use. Here's the traditional use. Never eat it raw. It has to be slow cooked for a full day or more before it's safe and digestible. Number 15. Krosnes, the tiny tuber with the strangest sugar on earth. First cultivated in Europe in the tiny French town of Krosny back in 1882, this naughty little tuber, also called the Chinese artichoke, quietly became a delicacy in French and Chinese kitchens alike, even though almost nobody outside those circles has heard of it. This wasn't a random garnish. It was one of the most concentrated gut-feeding foods ever discovered. Modern science confirms Krosnes contain up to 80% stachiosa by dry weight, making them the richest known dietary source of this particular gut sugar family. Your body can't break stachiosa down at all, but your gut bacteria ferment it into short-chain fatty acids that fuel your gut lining and support immune regulation. Here's the traditional use. Eat them lightly steamed or sautéed with butter and parsley, the way the French traditionally serve them. Number 14. Swede, the rutabaga nobody realized was a gut fiber powerhouse. Also known as rutabaga, the Swede emerged in Europe as a cold-hardy survival crop, something entire villages could rely on through brutal winters when little else would grow. It got dismissed for generations as plain, humble peasant food. This wasn't just filler for hard times. It was quietly doing real digestive work the whole time. Modern science confirms Swede's fiber is rich in hemicelluloses and pectins, the kind that slow digestion, add healthy bulk to stool, and feed beneficial bacteria deep in the colon. It also contains sulfur compounds that gut bacteria convert into anti-inflammatory byproducts. Swede got forgotten because it's cheap, plain-looking, and impossible to market, not because it stopped working. Here's the traditional use. Peel, cube, and roast or mash it just like a potato. Number 13. Celeriac, the ugly root that soothes stomachs since ancient Rome. Also called celery root, celeriac has been grown around the Mediterranean since antiquity and became a fixture of French winter cooking by the 1600s, despite looking like something you'd throw away rather than eat. This wasn't just a soup filler. It was chosen deliberately for how it made people feel afterward. Modern science confirms celeriac is rich in soluble fiber, potassium, and vitamin K. When cooked down, its soft, creamy flesh forms a texture that's gentle on an irritated digestive tract, which is exactly why it shows up so often in traditional recovery broths. Here's the traditional use. Peel and simmer it into a soft, creamy soup or puree. Number 12. Taro root, the ancient tropical staple with a built-in gut trick. Taro has been a staple crop across tropical Asia and the Pacific for thousands of years, a food so central to daily life it shows up in creation stories in places like Hawaii, long before anyone understood why it seemed to settle the stomach. This wasn't just tradition, it was a built-in digestive strategy. Modern science confirms that when taro is cooked and then cooled, its starch converts into resistant starch, a fiber-like carbohydrate that resists digestion in the small intestine and instead feeds beneficial bacteria like bifidobacterium in the colon, which produce gut-protective butyrate. Its natural mucilage also helps calm bloating and irritation along the way. Here's the traditional use. Cook it, let it cool completely, and eat it cold or reheated. Never eat it raw, since raw taro is irritating and mildly toxic. Number 11. Chinese yam, the root prescribed for 3 organs at once. Known as shan yao in traditional Chinese medicine, this yam has been used for centuries as a therapeutic food believed to nourish the spleen, lungs, and kidneys simultaneously, gentle enough that it was traditionally given to pregnant women, new mothers, and even babies as congee. This wasn't vague folk wisdom. It was a targeted, whole-system food. Modern science confirms Chinese yam is rich in resistant starch and inulin, along with a compound called dioscanin that shows hormone-balancing activity in research. Its slippery mucilage coats and soothes the gut lining, which is likely why it was considered safe for the most vulnerable people to eat. Here's the traditional use. Peel and steam it, or simmer it into a mild rice congee. Number 10. Konjac root, the gel-forming root that's basically ancient appetite control. Native to the subtropical regions of East Asia, konjac has been processed into flour and jelly-like foods for centuries. Long before fiber supplement existed as a category, people were already using this root to feel full and regulate digestion. This wasn't just texture for texture's sake, it was functional design. Modern science confirms konjac flour is up to 90% glucomannan, one of the most water-absorbent fibers known. It forms a thick gel in the stomach that slows digestion, increases fullness, and blocks some absorption of cholesterol and sugar. In the colon, it slowly ferments and feeds beneficial bacteria like bacteroids and lactobacillus, easing chronic constipation along the way. Here's the traditional use. It's usually bought as a flour or jelly, like shirataki noodles. Just follow the package prep, since raw konjac corms aren't eaten directly. If you're starting to realize how simple real gut support can be, hit that like button. It helps this video reach people who need to see it. And if you haven't subscribed, do that now. Real quick, I want to pause here because a lot of people ask me, this is great, but where do I actually find these roots? Not the sad, waxy grocery store salsify or the pre-cut supermarket taro that's half dried out. And that's the right question, because most of what's labeled prebiotic on store shelves is a refined powder stripped of everything that made the whole root work in the first place. Your best shot at the real thing is a farmer's market, an Asian or Latin American grocer, or growing a few yourself if you've got the space. These roots are far more common in home gardens and specialty markets than in a regular supermarket aisle. Now let's get back to the list because we're just getting into the ones that are going to genuinely surprise you. Number 9. Aluco, the waxy, magenta-spotted Andean root that lines your stomach. Grown high in the Andes for thousands of years alongside potatoes, aluco was a staple crop for indigenous farming communities long before anyone studied its texture scientifically. Prized for a strange, almost slippery quality when cooked. This wasn't a quirk, it was the entire point. Modern science confirms aluco's mucilaginous pectins physically coat the stomach and duodenal walls, easing acid irritation, while its fiber slow ferments to feed colonic bacteria. It's also rich in betalains, the same antioxidant pigments found in beets. Here's the traditional use. Peel and boil it whole until tender, and eat its skin on where it's young and thin. Number 8. Yacon, the apple sweet root that reshapes your gut lining. Grown for centuries in the Andes, yacon has a crisp, sweet, almost fruity flesh, which is why it was traditionally eaten raw as a snack, long before anyone understood why it barely affected blood sugar the way other sweet roots did. This wasn't a coincidence of taste. It was a deliberate, low-impact sugar source. Modern science confirms yacon is rich in short-chain fructooligosaccharides and inulin that pass through the upper digestive tract untouched. In animal studies, yacon has shown a trophic effect on the colon lining, actually increasing crypt depth and the density of mucus-producing cells, which means more surface area for absorption and more protective mucus overall. Here's the traditional use. Peel and eat it raw, slice like a fruit, or juice it. Number 7. Aracacha, the Peruvian carrot with a starch nobody else has. Known as the Peruvian carrot, aracacha has been grown in the Andes for generations as a staple starch, often the first solid food given to babies in parts of South America because of how easily it cooks down and digests. This wasn't just about convenience, it was about what happens to the starch after cooking. Modern science confirms aracacha's starch gelatinizes at an unusually low temperature, and once it's cooked and cooled, it develops high levels of resistant starch, the same fermentable fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria while keeping blood sugar spikes low after meals. Here's the traditional use. Boil or steam it, then let it cool before eating. Cooling is what unlocks the resistant starch. Number 6. Mashua, the Andean root domesticated over 7,500 years ago. High in the Peru-Bolivia mountains, mashua was domesticated so long ago it predates most written history, grown as a hardy staple even in soil too poor for other crops. Locals also traditionally treated it as a food to eat only in moderation, not something to lean on daily. This wasn't superstition, it was earned caution. Modern science confirms mashua is rich in resistant starch, protein, and vitamin C, and its natural compounds break down into anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial substances in the gut. But animal research has also linked regular mashua consumption to reduce testosterone and sperm quality, which lines up with the old caution around eating it only occasionally, not as a daily staple. Here's the traditional use. Cook it thoroughly and treat it as an occasional root, not a everyday staple. Number 5. Oca, the Andean tuber that has to be sun-cured before it's safe. Second only to the potato in importance, across the Andean highlands, oca has been cultivated for thousands of years, but never eaten straight out of the ground. Farmers traditionally laid the harvested tubers out in direct sunlight for days before anyone touched them. This wasn't decoration or superstition. It was a deliberate detox step. Modern science confirms raw oca contains meaningful levels of soluble oxalates, which can irritate the gut and contribute to kidney stones if eaten carelessly. Solar curing sweetens the tubers and reduces that oxalate load, and thorough boiling afterward leaches out most of what's left, which is exactly the two-step process traditional growers always used. Here's the traditional use. Sun cure the tubers for several days after harvest, then boil thoroughly before eating. Number 4. Black salsify, the charcoal-skinned root that stains your hands. Also called scorzonera or viper's grass, black salsify has an unmistakable dark gnarled skin hiding a pure white interior underneath, and anyone who's ever broken one open knows it bleeds a sticky white sap that stains skin brown on contact. Traditional cooks always peeled it under running or lemon water, never dry. This wasn't just about keeping hands clean. It was about protecting the root's most active compounds. Modern science confirms black salsify is a concentrated source of prebiotic inulin that selectively feeds bifidobacterium and beneficial lactobacillus species. It also contains bioactive compounds called falcarinol and falcarindiol, shown in research to have anti-inflammatory effects in the colon lining. Here's the traditional use. Peel it under water with a splash of lemon added, then simmer or roast it. Number 3. Chicory root, the bitter root that quietly rewires your gut bacteria. For centuries, chicory root was roasted and used as a coffee substitute across Europe, especially in hard times when real coffee was scarce or too expensive. Its bitterness wasn't a flaw people tolerated. It was part of why it was used at all. This wasn't just a coffee stand-in. It was digestive medicine in disguise. Modern science confirms chicory root contains up to 68% inulin fresh and nearly 98% when dried, one of the most concentrated inulin sources known. Research shows it shifts gut bacteria ratios in a specific way, suppressing a harmful inflammation-linked bacterial species while enriching beneficial bifidobacterium. Its bitter compounds also stimulate bile secretion, which helps with fat digestion. Chicory got forgotten because instant coffee was faster to market and easier to sell, not because it stopped working. Here's the traditional use. Roast, grind, and brew the root like coffee, or add the raw root to soups and stews. Number 2. White salsify, the oyster plant hiding potent gut fiber in plain sight. Called the oyster plant for its delicate seafood-like flavor, white salsify has been grown across the Mediterranean since ancient times, a food elegant enough for centuries of European tables, yet almost nobody today has heard of it. This wasn't just a refined delicacy, it was a functional one. Modern science confirms white salsify's long taproot is rich in soluble inulin, potassium, iron, and vitamin C. Like its darker cousin black salsify, it feeds bifidobacterium directly and supports regular bowel function, offering the same core prebiotic benefit in a milder, sweeter package. Here's the traditional use. Peel and simmer it in acidulated water, then roast or mash it like a root vegetable, and here we are. Number 1. The one I saved for last. Jerusalem artichoke, the sunflower root that started all of this. Also called the sunchoke, the Jerusalem artichoke isn't from Jerusalem at all. It's a perennial sunflower native to central North America, cultivated by indigenous peoples long before European settlers arrived, and later carried across the Atlantic where it became a staple crop in parts of Europe for centuries. This wasn't a fringe food. For a long stretch of history, it was a primary carbohydrate source. This wasn't chosen by accident. It was chosen because almost nothing else stores this much of one specific thing. Modern science confirms the sunchoke tuber is roughly 80% inulin by dry carbohydrate weight, one of the highest concentrations found in any root on this list. That inulin acts as a highly selective fuel source for bifidobacterium, the same beneficial bacteria that chicory, black salsify, and white salsify were all feeding in their own way. But here's the catch that traditional cooks always knew and modern people keep learning the hard way. Eaten raw, that same concentrated inulin can cause serious gas and bloating in a gut that isn't adapted to it. Traditional preparation always meant cooking it first, roasting, boiling, slow simmering, breaking those long fiber chains down before they hit your system all at once. When researchers look at root vegetables like these as a system rather than one at a time, a pattern shows up. Chicory suppresses harmful bacteria while feeding good ones. Burdock does the same, with different phenolic backup. Konjac gels and slows digestion. Taro and Aracacha build resistant starch after cooling. Kamas and Mashua both demanded patience and preparation before they were safe. And at the center of nearly all of it is the same mechanism the sunchoke does at maximum strength. Feed the right bacteria, starve the wrong ones, and give your gut lining the fuel it needs to hold itself together. This is not coincidence, or if it is, it's the most precise, repeating coincidence in the history of traditional food. Here's the traditional use. Cook sunchokes thoroughly, roasted, boiled, or simmered, before eating them, and start with a small portion if it's your first time. Vein roots, thousands of years of accumulated observation. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The people who grew, harvested, and prepared these roots weren't primitive. They were paying attention. They watched what settled a stomach, what caused trouble raw but not cooked, what kept people regular through long winters, and they built traditions around those observations, generation after generation. And now modern science, with its clinical studies, its microbiome sequencing, its biochemical analysis, keeps arriving at the same conclusions. Chicory feeds bifidobacterium. Konjac slows digestion and eases constipation. Taro builds resistant starch when cooled. Kamas has to be slow cooked for a full day before it's safe. Oka has to be sun cured before it's edible. None of these were arbitrary rules. The tradition was right. It just didn't always explain the mechanism. Because for the people who built it, the mechanism was never the point. The result was, before I let you go, quality matters enormously here. The difference between a fresh, whole root you prepared yourself and a processed prebiotic powder stripped down to one isolated fiber is not a small difference. It's the difference between feeding your gut a whole ecosystem of compounds or just one narrow slice of what these roots actually offer. Whenever you can, go for the whole root, fresh or dried in its original form, over the supplement aisle version. Your gut bacteria evolved on whole foods, not isolates. Drop a comment and tell me which root surprised you most. Was it the one that nearly took down Lewis and Clark, or the one hiding in plain sight this whole time? I read every single comment. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now and ring the bell so you never miss what's coming next. We post every week and we're just getting started. See you in the next one.